Married couples who sleep in separate rooms, why do you do this? My grandparents do this. My grandfather built a small apartment on the second floor of their house. They do it because they have different sleep schedules, and in general they spend much of the day apart because they like it that way. But they always eat lunch and dinner together, and my grandfather loves to listen to her soft footsteps throughout the day. He calls her the woman next door. It's really cute. My parents slept in separate beds, as did my great-grandparents. For my great-grandparents it was a comfort thing. Grandma didn't like not being able to move around the bed at will. She and grandpa loved each other dearly, and she passed not long after he did, because she missed him so much. For my parents it was a couple things. As my dad aged, his sleep cycle went weird. He would be able to sleep a couple hours, and then be up half the night, and fall asleep again about the time my mom was getting up for work. Also my mom has sleep apnea, and uses a CPAP. It made hella noise back then. Dad was half deaf and the sound still bothered him. Out of respect for each other they decided it was better to have separate bedrooms. This makes me feel better about my husband and I not sharing a bed. Haha. Some people act like that means your marriage is falling apart. Honestly it helps us love each other more, because I'm not up multiple times a night with his tossing and turning, and he's not up all night listening to my snoring. My wife and I usually work opposite days off to watch the kid. We both work nights so it's tough. When I'm working, she'll watch him and sleep in the nursery or the other room. When she's working, I'll watch him and stay in the other room. Luckily my wife works 3 days a week, usually, and I can drop him off with my parents 1 day out of the week. Her aunt is staying with us for a few months, and it helps a lot. When her aunt leaves it's gonna suck again. The kid will be a year and a half soon, and he just likes being terrible most of the time, especially when I get home after a 12-hour day and just want to sleep. I'm really considering getting a full-time nanny, but godmom, are they expensive? Assuming you're in the States, look into the AU Pair in America program. You'll be surprised how reasonable childcare can be. I was an AU pair in the mid-90s. I'm British and was 18 at the time. I got to live with an American family for a year, watch their 3 kids, do the grocery shopping, take the kids to school and activities, do their laundry, and a bit of light housekeeping. They had a cleaner. In return I got free room and board, the use of a car, and got to spend a year hanging out in the States, traveling, meeting new people and partying. Thank you fake ID. I got paid $100 a week pocket money, and they got 45 hours of childcare a week. Great experience all round, and we are still in touch 20 or so years later. My stepmother's parents took this to a new level. He built a second house next door. They lived next to each other for 20 years, before they both passed in a short amount of time. It seemed very odd to me, but it worked for them. At least from an outside perspective. I know images never reflect reality. Not exactly the same, but I had a great aunt and uncle who had some kind of huge disagreement early in their marriage, and never spoke to each other again, even though they lived together. They slept in different rooms, and he spent most of his time at home in his garden. She took care of the house, cooked his meals, did his laundry, etc. etc. He went to work, and paid the bills. At family gatherings the men would hang out with the husband in one room and the women with the wife in another. They remained married that way the rest of their lives. When he died she was apparently utterly devastated. We are both 41, been married 23 years and sleep in different beds. First half of our marriage we always slept in the same bed. Of course there was the occasional crying kid who wanted mommy to sleep with them, or falling asleep on the couch or somewhere else. About 10 years ago I spent a year working a midnight shift, so I started sleep on our spare bed in the basement. We both realized we had much better sleep separate in our own beds. After I went back to a day shift we went back to sleeping in the same bed and soon realized sleeping apart was more restful. Over time we bought 2 full-size beds and put them in our bedroom, like the old TV shows. It's been great. Edit. So a lot of comments about intimacy. Yeah, we have 6. I'd say every bit as much as we ever did in the past. We've been married over half our life, so we are really good at knowing when fun time is going to happen. Sometimes we sleep in the same bed. There is no rules we have to sleep separately all the time. Our beds are about a foot apart and sometimes we slide them together, especially when the kids were younger, and they'd end up in our room, along with the dog. Edit 2. Yes, we got married at 18. We went to prom together, and girlfriend somehow got pregnant after prom, when we stopped for soda. So we got married. My buddy is basically married, and they have this arrangement. Basically they say they aren't one person just because they are dating. They don't want to be the couple who merges into one entity. They are two separate adults and adults have their own rooms. They are two of the most capable and competent people I've ever met in my life. They have their shit figured out. They are the reason I no longer view two separate rooms as a sign of a dysfunctional relationship. If anything, they make me think most relationships would benefit from their let's not do literally everything together mentality. When my now husband, of 10 years, first moved in with me, when we were dating, I'd just bought a 3-bedroom house. We decided to have our own bedrooms. More like roommates who were dating than like two people taking the next step. We low-key loved that setup. I had a king-size bed and he could have a sleepover, but he also worked weird shifts and had his own bed, and I had mine, and we had our own spaces. It was so nice. Then we got married, and I got pregnant, and it became convenient to just move him into my bedroom. So we became traditional married sleepers. People kind of thought what we did was weird, but it was the best arrangement ever. Something was so satisfying about being together and sharing a house, but still having our own private places too. I realize now, the kids have that with their bedrooms, but we really don't. I mean, we are fine and things are great, but there is something special about having a room that is only yours. Married people having to share is kind of strange really, if you think about it. I realize now, the kids have that with their bedrooms, but we really don't. I thought about this recently when my husband, son, and I moved out of our old apartment. I was setting up the master bedroom at the new place and thought I have nowhere to put my stuff. If it doesn't have a place in the living room, or on my vanity, then I don't have a place for it in the apartment. My son has his own room and a huge closet all to himself, and a desk with plenty of drawers and a work table and his own bookcase. I have a bookcase in the living room and my vanity and half a closet lol. My dream is to get a big house one day and take one of the rooms for myself. Not to sleep in. I like sharing a sleeping space with my husband, but to comfortably keep my stuff and hang out in when I want some quiet. You know, like what my kid has right now lol. When I was very young, my mother started sleeping on the couch every night. I remember asking her why, and she gave excuses like her back hurt and their bed and the couch was more comfy, or my dad's books were always scattered across her side of the bed and she didn't want to clean them up all the time. Dad was an avid reader. He had stacks of books as tall as the bed that were surrounding his half of the bed. This went on for a couple decades. Mom never got a proper bed of her own, just invested in high quality couches for our living room, and chose to sleep there every night. Then one day, years after I'd grown and moved out of the house, my parents announced a divorce, which shocked me because I had never known any discontent between them. I asked my mother what happened, and she said that she fell out of love with my dad after my sister was born, but she didn't want the two of us kids growing up in a broken home, so they agreed to live together until we had both moved out of the house. My parents were still the best of friends, just not lovers. So it was awkward for them to be sharing a bed together. My mother now lives on the opposite side of the country from the rest of us, on land she inherited from her mother. She built a cabin in the woods, and is now happily living on her own. She has friends where she lives, but claims she doesn't need a relationship anymore. Just as a disclaimer, there are quite a few studies that suggest that doing what they did is actually much worse for their children's well-being. Evidence suggests that getting divorced when your kids are in their 20s creates much worse trust issues and mental health problems for the kids. Give your issues time, do your best to work on your relationship, but in the end, if you know it's not going to work out, just bite the bullet and get it over with. So many children of divorced parents have said that they were relieved when they finally announced the divorce because it was better than living in such a strained situation. Obviously it's not the same as having happily married parents, but better to have functioning and relieved humans than a pair of people making each other miserable. In my particular situation, my parents were fine with living with one another. It wasn't a strained situation at all. Like I said, they were best friends. My sister and I grew up in a normal, healthy environment, surrounded by two loving parents, and we eventually became fully functional adults. If anything, finding out my parents didn't love each other made a bunch of things click for me, like how I never saw them being intimate with each other. In all my life, I only saw them kiss once, and it was because my sister and I egged them on to do it once, when we were really little. Also, my dad never came with us to visit my mother's side of the family, and vice versa. My parents cohabitated around the house a lot, living together without doing much together. If there's been any damage to my psyche from growing up in that environment, I guess it shows in my vague boundaries on love. I always thought that parents loved each other, so I took all my own parents' actions toward each other for a form of affection. This explains why I can so easily move between friendship and love with others in my life, and why I used to confuse friendship for romantic affection. Because the love I experienced in my household was actually just friendship. I also grew used to everyone just doing their own thing and living their own lives in my childhood home, so I grew a sort of detachment from my family. I love them with all my heart, but I feel no desire to stay in regular contact with them. I could go years without talking to them, then pick up the phone and have a great conversation like nothing ever happened. And I'm always happy to visit them, but I'm also living my own life now, and visiting family isn't very high on my priorities. I know it's caused some stress with my parents, because I don't call or visit enough, but it hasn't negatively affected my relationship with them, and they're always grateful to see me again, and I with them. So things mostly worked out for my family, but I can understand how couples forcing themselves to stay together for the children or any other excuse could potentially foster a bad environment for the delicate developing minds of their kids. My parents and grandparents do this. My parents because of a variety of reasons including marital strain and my dad's PTSD from the military messing with his sleep something fierce. My grandparents because of marital strain, weird and non-complementary work schedules, and my grandma's quickly reaching the point where it's hard for her to walk up the stairs to the master bedroom anyway. My last boss and his wife do this. They're very happily married. He just has severe leg issues that have him tossing and turning in bed a ton in an attempt to get less uncomfortable, and they quickly realized that if either of them wanted any degree of quality sleep they'd need to have separate beds. I like to sleep in the middle of the queen bed, and he prefers the couch. We still sleep in the same bed from time to time, but usually I end up waking him up and asking him to move so I can stretch out. We also have a bit of a weird setup because I have stage 4 breast cancer. I tend to sleep a lot and at random times, which meant being hidden away from my family for long periods of time. So to counter this, we brought my queen bed into the living room. I sleep in the bed and he on the couch across from me. This allows for us to be together, but comfortable, and it also allows for our kids to spend time with me, even if I'm sleeping or resting. They love being able to play on the bed or cuddle and watch TV, and think it is great. We know it is weird and makes people uncomfortable who are not used to seeing this, but we don't care, it is what works for us. Not married. Hope that's not a requirement. Boyfriend snores, no apnea. Tried the breath right strips and they worked, but they gave him horrible bruises on his nose. Not fault of the product, his skin is very sensitive, and he bruises easy. We start in the same bed, and I end up in other bed at some point of the night. He usually falls asleep before me, so he doesn't notice. He just remembers falling asleep in the same bed. If I do fall asleep first I will usually wake up from the snoring and move to the other bed. I have to get up 2 hours before him for work anyway, so he also isn't disturbed by my alarm. I go and kiss him goodbye and it's fine. It actually works out fine. It's like when couples fall asleep intertwined and move apart through the night to their own side of the bed. Weekends we do sleep the whole night together, because I'm usually too tired to be woken up from the snoring. And we have different preferences in the bed. He likes soft, and I like firm. I'd rather sleep on the floor than a soft memory foam mattress. We talk about things that bother us, and check in every now and again with things like this. Communication is key.